Melt forward.
Yes. Yeah.
So you melted,
right.
and then
I harnessed it.
You harnessed it, and the liquid poured forward
like a mercury volcano.
In 1986, they were young soldiers conquering Hollywood. Their war movie became a masterpiece, launching careers that seemed unstoppable. But 40 years later, something went terribly wrong. One actor spent $50,000 on prostitutes, and later revealed a secret that shocked millions. Another lost everything in bitter divorces, and now survives on just $4,000 a month. A third saved a co-star's life during filming, but decades later faces his own battles. What happened to these once promising stars will leave you speechless. Charlie Sheen. He was just 20 when he got dropped into the mud of the Philippines. But nothing could have prepared Charlie Sheen for what Oliver Stone had planned. This wasn't some Hollywood set. For 2 weeks, Charlie and the rest of the cast were stripped of comfort and routine, shoved into real military-style drills, forced to sleep in the dirt, soaked by tropical rain, bitten by bugs, and screamed at by combat veterans who didn't care that they were actors. It was brutal. Charlie said years later that he thought he might actually die during that shoot. The cameras hadn't even rolled yet, and he was already unraveling. But that was exactly what Stone wanted. The pain, the confusion, the exhaustion, that would all show up on screen as raw truth. It almost never happened. The role was supposed to go to Emilio Estevez, then Keanu Reeves. Both dropped. But Stone saw something in Charlie, a cracked edge under the surface, something that would work perfectly for a scared, idealistic kid thrown into Vietnam. When Platoon finally came out in 1986, Charlie was 21, and the movie exploded. Oscars, applause, stardom. But instead of rising, Charlie started burning. The fire never really stopped. In 1995, under oath, he admitted to spending at least $50,000 on prostitutes. That same year, he was arrested for slamming his girlfriend's head into the floor. In public, he still smiled, still joked. But behind the scenes, things got darker, more erratic, more broken. By 2011, the cracks exploded. He was fired from 2.5 Men after a bizarre spiral of interviews, drug binges, and threats against his co-stars. He posted rambling videos online calling himself a warlock with tiger blood, said he was a winner while the world watched him fall apart. It should have been the end. Then came 2015. In front of millions, he revealed he had HIV. He'd known for years. He'd hidden it, paid people off, spiraled deeper into shame and recklessness. But the moment he said it, clinics around the country reported a spike in HIV testing. People started asking questions, getting help. They called it the Charlie Sheen effect. That same man who'd once been the punchline of every late-night joke had unknowingly saved lives. The money ran low, the scandals stacked up, but somehow he stayed alive. By 2017, he said he was sober. Friends didn't believe it at first. He'd said it before, but this time, something was different. He wasn't chasing cameras. He was staying home, watching movies, cooking dinner, and being a dad. And then came the twist no one saw coming. In 2025, Charlie, now 60, released a memoir and Netflix documentary. Quiet, slow, almost reflective. In it, he opened a door he'd kept shut his whole life. He talked about same-sex experiences, not as gossip, not as scandal, just as truth. He didn't label anything, didn't care to. He talked about how freeing it felt, how he spent decades trying to be someone he wasn't, and how now, finally, he could just be. Tom Berenger. Tom Berenger was born on May 31st, 1949, under the name Thomas Michael Moore. And for years, he walked through life unseen in the Hollywood crowd, just another struggling actor juggling cheap jobs in New York. He worked as a hotel baggage handler, then labored at a chemical plant. There was no shortcut, no sudden miracle. His first real screen break didn't even come until 1975 on a soap opera called One Life to Live. By then, he was already in his late 20s. He held on, pushed harder, and by the time Platoon hit theaters in 1986, he had finally carved out a place. But that role as Sergeant Barnes didn't come easy. It came through pain. When Oliver Stone cast him, he didn't just hand him a script. He dropped Berenger and the rest of the cast into a real jungle in the Philippines, stripped away all comforts, and forced them into a military boot camp. They were ordered to carry 40-pound packs, march through mud, sleep in the rain, and eat eat almost nothing. It was 2 straight weeks of brutal survival. Berenger lost 28 pounds. They filmed through 16-hour days, sleep-deprived, mosquito-bitten, soaked in sweat and fear. It wasn't acting anymore, and when he stared into the camera with those hollow, war-worn eyes, you could feel the cost. But off-screen, things were just as raw. Berenger built a career on playing men with power, but in his real life, he kept losing what mattered. 4 marriages collapsed, 6 kids, many raised apart. By 2011, during one of his darkest moments, he was cornered in a bitter divorce by a lawyer who slipped him a legal amendment he barely read. The result cost him over $100,000. His rights erased, his trust shattered. Years later, he admitted he never fully recovered from that betrayal. Hollywood stopped calling as often. His name slipped off the posters. While the world moved on to newer faces, Berenger stepped back. Now, at 76, he lives quietly with his 4th wife, Laura Moretti, far from the noise of premieres and red carpets. Fans still recognize him. They see the soldier, but they don't see the man who lost almost everything to become that legend. Willem Dafoe, born in Appleton, Wisconsin, he didn't follow the rules. He didn't want to. In fact, he got expelled from high school after appearing in an adult film. He laughed it off years later. "I just wanted out," he said. It became a theme. Dafoe never chased stardom. He chased intensity. And when Platoon came in 1986, he was already known in underground theater circles. But that film changed everything. Like Berenger, he was thrown into the madness of Stone's jungle. 30 days of military training under Vietnam vet Dale Dye. They marched, crawled, got fake ambushed with real explosives, lived on edge every day. Then Dafoe got hit with yellow fever. It wasn't a subplot, it was real. He lay in the heat, hallucinating, burning with fever, but still showed up for his scenes. The heat didn't stop him. The role was too important. Sergeant Elias wasn't just a soldier. He was the conscience of the story, and Dafoe poured everything into him. After Platoon, his choices got stranger, bolder. He was fired from Heaven's Gate for laughing during a serious scene, despite standing still for 8 hours. Years later, on Antichrist, director Lars von Trier replaced his private parts with a stand-in because, according to Lars, Dafoe's real anatomy was confusingly large for audiences. Dafoe laughed that one off too. He got a Golden Raspberry nomination for Speed 2, which scored just 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. Then he played a bushman in The Hunter who had to skin a wallaby in one take, or it would explode, and he nailed it. No excuses, no second chances. He took roles that hurt, roles that made no sense, roles that terrified most actors. He once played a chicken heart in a stage piece, drilled over and over by his director until the rhythm felt alive. The risks paid off. He earned 4 Oscar nominations and kept working non-stop, from Wes Anderson films to Nosferatu in 2025. He holds dual citizenship with Italy, splits his time between Rome and New York, and still walks the streets like a man who never planned to be famous. His net worth hovers around $40 million, but money was never the goal. He said it himself. He just wants to keep disappearing into characters. Now, at 70, Willem Dafoe still moves like a storm. Chaotic, unpredictable, alive. And even though he once lost a job for laughing, he never lost momentum. His face, twisted and intense, still haunts the screen. Forrest Whitaker Forrest. Whitaker was just 28 when he stepped into the jungle as Big Harold, but the look in his eyes told a different story. At 5'10" and about 75 kilos, he had a sturdy frame, but the heat, sweat, and fear of the Philippines shoot would strip him down in more ways than one. The role didn't give him many lines, but it gave him something harder to fake. Pure, haunted silence. You could feel the weight of the war in the way he moved, the way he sat still. Oliver Stone wanted realism, and Forrest gave it, but it came at a price. He had plans to bulk up, to actually become Big Harold, but the jungle didn't care about plans. It drained him fast. The food was terrible, the work brutal, and by the time they were halfway through shooting, he'd dropped nearly 8 kg. What started as preparation turned into survival. His face grew sharper, eyes sunken, and that unspoken terror began to feel real, not performed, but lived. Then came the machete. It wasn't even a filming day. They were just out in training, trying to stay in character, living like soldiers. Forrest saw a coconut, raised a blade, and swung with all the frustration and exhaustion building inside him. The blade missed its mark and landed square on his thumb. Blood came fast, shocking everyone, but what he remembers is the panic, the taste of it in his mouth as it ran down his arms. It was supposed to be pretend, but suddenly it wasn't. He was rushed to a medic, and it was all still rehearsal, not even the real shoot, and somehow that moment stuck in his bones. Years later, when he won an Oscar for playing Idi Amin in The Last King of Scotland, people called him intense, transformative, fearless. But before any of that, he was just a young actor in a jungle, bleeding out under the weight of someone else's war. Oliver Stone noticed the weight loss, pulled him aside, and said, "You're supposed to be Big Harold." But the name didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the camera caught everything: the drained cheeks, the 1,000-yard stare, the body worn thin by something bigger than him. By 2025, Forrest is 64, but there's still something hollow and beautiful in the way he carries himself. You can still see Big Harold in him, the man who entered the jungle for a role and came out carrying pieces of it for life. Keith David was 30 when he arrived on set, all muscle and gravel voice, towering at 6'2". They called him King on and off screen, not just because of the role, but because of how he carried himself. His voice made you stop and listen, but it was his timing that saved a life. One day, mid-shoot, they were flying in a Huey helicopter. It wasn't a set, it was real. Everything about Platoon was meant to blur that line. The chopper tilted without warning, and Charlie Sheen, still young, still reckless, tumbled toward the open side. The jungle below was real too, and so was death. Keith didn't even think. He reached out, grabbed the back of Sheen's jacket, and yanked him back inside. That single moment, unplanned, unscripted, changed everything. If he'd been a second slower, Platoon would have become something much darker. People forget that story. It didn't make the behind-the-scenes reels, but those who were there never forgot. Charlie Sheen never forgot. And Keith David just kept moving forward. He built a career that didn't rely on FaceTime. His voice became the signature of worlds. Gargoyles, Spawn, Mass Effect, Halo, Call of Duty, Ken Burns documentaries, you name it. He was there, grounding everything with that deep, warm thunder in his throat. By 2025, he's 69. He's lost some of the sharpness in his jawline, sure, but gained something else: presence. He still walks like a soldier, still speaks like a preacher. And now, finally, they're giving him a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2026. He called it the cherry on top, but anyone who's followed his work knows it's just overdue. It's not the kind of story where he fades away into narration work. He's still performing jazz, still showing up, still creating, and through it all, he carries the weight of that helicopter save, the lines he delivered in sweat-soaked silence, the strength that doesn't go away just because the cameras stopped rolling. Kevin Dillon was only 21 when he stepped into the humid chaos of Vietnam, or at least Oliver Stone's version of it. He wasn't the star, but he didn't need to be. In Platoon, he played Bunny, a wired, unstable soldier with an eerie laugh and a haunted stare. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you remembered it. One line stuck in everyone's head like shrapnel. After brutally beating a villager with a rifle, he screamed, "Holy shit! You see that fucking head come apart, man?" That wasn't acting that made you admire the character. It was acting that made your skin crawl, and it put Kevin Dillon on Hollywood's map instantly. But fame doesn't always bring freedom. Dillon found himself boxed into that same character, violent, twitchy, wild-eyed. It took years to carve a new identity, and it wasn't until 2004 that he truly flipped the script. HBO's Entourage gave him a second life. As Johnny Drama Chase, he was older, desperate, insecure, and always reaching for fame just out of reach. It was funny and tragic at the same time, and Dillon played it perfectly. The show ran for 8 seasons, pulling him out of the shadow of Platoon and into the glow of household recognition. He earned 3 Emmy nominations and a Golden Globe nod, but more than that, it gave him something rare: big money. $11 million over the series run, peaking at $150,000 per episode, and another $2 million for the 2015 movie. Just from Entourage, he cleared $13 million. Still, success wasn't a straight line. Born in 1965 in Mamaroneck, New York, Kevin was part of a big family, one of 6 kids. His brother, Matt Dillon, became a teen idol, but Kevin followed a darker path on screen. Off-screen, things were unstable too. He married Jane Stewart in 2006 and had a daughter, Ava. He already had another daughter, Amy, from a previous relationship. But by 2019, the marriage collapsed in courtrooms and headlines. His ex-wife revealed the brutal truth in documents. Kevin had once earned millions, but was now surviving on $4,000 a month, scraping to meet child support and bills after the Entourage wave crashed. He didn't quit, though. He couldn't. He pivoted to action movies and thrillers, staying busy, and eventually joined the podcast world with Victory the Podcast, alongside his old entourage co-stars. At 59, his face no longer holds the same sharp youth it did back in the jungle scenes of Platoon, but the humor is still there. John C. McGinley. John C. McGinley's journey into Platoon was practically an accident. In 1984, he wasn't famous. He was just filling in as an understudy for John Turturro off-Broadway when a casting agent spotted him. Weeks later, he was thrown into the Philippine jungle, face-to-face with one of the rawest war films ever shot. At 27, he was playing Sergeant O'Neill, the slippery, spineless survivor who lives through it all by hiding under corpses during the film's blood-soaked climax. It wasn't a hero's role, it was something messier, cowardice disguised as cunning, survival at any cost. What the audience didn't see was what happened behind the camera. McGinley and the cast were put through a brutal boot camp designed by Vietnam vet Dillon. No coddling, no trailers, just mud, sweat, live fire drills, and no sleep. McGinley later said he could actually feel the blanks zipping past his ears. By the time the camera rolled, the fear wasn't acting. It was real. The film became a cultural earthquake, and McGinley's performance stood out. Not flashy, not loud, but unsettling in its realism. After Platoon, McGinley didn't slow down. His career exploded in directions no one predicted. Comedies, dramas, cult roles. Most people remember him as Dr. Cox in Scrubs, spitting insults like a machine gun, somehow making rage feel warm. But what mattered more was what happened off-screen. In 2001, life shifted. His son Max was born with Down syndrome, and suddenly the Hollywood hustle stopped meaning as much. McGinley called it a cosmic hammer. Everything changed. He stepped back, canceled projects, focused on Max, who also had heart complications and severe sleep apnea. For a while, the career paused. The father took over, and then something remarkable happened. McGinley didn't disappear. He adapted. He became a loud, persistent voice for the Down syndrome community. He helped pass laws. He raised awareness. He used every bit of his platform to fight for kids like Max. And somehow, he found his way back into acting too. Hallmark movies, guest roles, comedies. The 2025 Scrubs revival brought him back into the spotlight at age 66. Still sharp, still searing. Johnny Depp. When Johnny Depp landed in the middle of a Philippine jungle at 22, he'd never stepped foot outside the United States. He wasn't a star yet. He wasn't even supposed to be remembered in the film. But what happened on the set of Platoon in 1985 didn't just test his body, it reshaped his path forever. The role was simple, Paviti, Gator Learner, a translator in the Platoon. Small part, few scenes, but behind the camera, everything was different. Oliver Stone had originally written a larger role for Depp, something closer to a supporting arc. But when it became clear that anything too strong would pull attention from Charlie Sheen's lead, Depp's scenes were quietly trimmed down. He didn't argue, he just showed up, stayed silent, and immersed himself in one of the most brutal boot camps Hollywood had ever seen. For 2 weeks, Depp and the rest of the cast lived as soldiers. No trailers, no hotel rooms, no showers, just foxholes, bugs, hunger, and constant exhaustion. They stayed in character day and night, led by Dale Dye, a Vietnam veteran who didn't go easy on anyone. It wasn't acting anymore, it was surviving. The heat was real, the fear was real. The rules were simple: eat like soldiers, move like soldiers, suffer like soldiers. Depp barely spoke in the movie, but when he did, it mattered. In the village interrogation scene, Sergeant Barnes shoots a woman in cold blood. Depp's character has to translate the screaming. His voice trembles. The words come slowly. They feel helpless. It wasn't a performance. It was a moment. He wore a helmet with the word Sherilyn scribbled across it. His way of staying connected to Sherilyn Fenn, his girlfriend back home. It was a quiet rebellion, tucked inside a war zone built for fiction. Most people didn't remember Depp from the film when it came out in December 1986, but it didn't matter. He remembered it. That was the last time he ever auditioned for a small part. By the time Platoon hit theaters, Depp had already been cast in 21 Jump Street. He was a teen idol now, but the jungle stayed with him. The mud, the sweat, the silence. It had all been real, and it had given him something no other role could, a sense that he could disappear into anything. Francesco Quinn, born in Rome on March 22, 1963, he carried the weight of a name people didn't forget. His father was Anthony Quinn, an Oscar winner, a titan. Francesco was the first son of Anthony's second wife, and from the moment he arrived in Hollywood, people expected him to live up to something larger than life. At 23, He landed the role of Ra in Platoon, a moody, intense soldier who dealt drugs, kept secrets, and watched everything with a survivor's stare. Ra wasn't a background character. He was the tension. He didn't have to pretend. Francesco wasn't just acting like a haunted soul. He was trying to escape one. His father's shadow loomed over everything. His last name opened doors, but it also turned every audition into a comparison. Platoon was his breakout. The film won Best Picture at the 1987 Academy Awards. People noticed him. Directors called. For a while, it seemed like he was going to break free. Francesco never became a superstar, but he didn't fade either. He worked. Dozens of roles came in. He appeared in Jag, 24, The Shield, The Young and the Restless. He became Thomas Del Cerro, a lonely writer. He played warriors, detectives, addicts. In 2008, he earned critical praise for The Tonto Woman, a short western adapted from Elmore Leonard's story. It got an Oscar nomination. People started looking at him again. And then came Transformers, Dark of the Moon. It was 2011. He voiced the Autobot Dino. He was 48. It turned out to be his last film. On August 5th, 2011, everything stopped. Francesco was jogging in Malibu with his son Max. It was supposed to be just another day. Then he collapsed. A neighbor saw him fall. They rushed to help. His wife was there when he passed, just like that. Gone. No long hospital battle, no scandal, just a sudden stop, a heart attack, maybe genetics, maybe stress, maybe something no one could explain. He died in the street, next to the child he was trying to raise. Francesco's story didn't get a red carpet ending, but people remembered the look in his eyes during Platoon, that restless calm, that depth, that edge of danger. He had carried something inside him, something that didn't always want to be seen, but never let go. He was Ra, and he was Francesco, and he was gone too soon. Tony Todd. He was 31 when they dropped him into the wet, sweltering jungles of the Philippines, handed him a gun, and told him to act like he'd been in Vietnam. But Tony Todd didn't have to act. He carried war in his bones. Not the kind with bullets, but the quiet war of being black in Hollywood, of being ignored, of having to fight twice as hard just to be seen. In February 1986, Platoon began its brutal 54-day shoot. The cast didn't just play soldiers, they became them. They dug real foxholes, slept on dirt, marched till their feet bled, trained under Dale Dye, who had survived Vietnam himself, and braced for explosions that weren't fake enough to feel safe. And in the middle of it all stood Todd, solid, still, the man playing Sergeant Warren like a mountain that didn't speak, unless it had to. Oliver Stone saw something in him that the industry kept missing. He cast him not from an audition room, but after watching Todd perform a one-man show in a dingy Hell's Kitchen theater. The play was Johnny Got His Gun, and Todd stood there alone, channeling the voice of a soldier who'd lost everything but his mind. It wasn't a Hollywood act. It was survival carved into performance. Stone wanted real faces, not polished stars. And Tony's face told stories of poverty, of theater grit, of rejection so thick it could drown you. Todd had the kind of voice that stayed with you. Deep, gravel-lined, unmistakable. But Hollywood didn't care. It saw the voice and gave him monsters, ghosts, side characters. Candyman in 1992 made him iconic, but it also locked him in a cage he didn't ask for. A black man with mythic power, terrifying, but never leading. He had the frame of a hero, the training of a classical actor, and the soul of someone who'd suffered to get there. But he kept being cast as shadows, never the sun. He married Fatima Cortez when his career started to lift. But when the spotlight comes, it doesn't bring warmth, it brings pressure. The long shoots, the endless conventions, the fans who wanted the monster more than the man. Love didn't vanish overnight, but it bent under the weight. Still, Todd didn't slow down. Final Destination gave him a second wave of fame, playing a mortician who saw death not as fear, but as rhythm. Each role he took came with the same steady power. calm on the surface, fire underneath. By the time he was 65, the world still hadn't given him the roles he deserved. But he worked anyway, through pain, through silence, through chemo. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer, but told almost no one. On set, he'd smile, crack jokes, then retreat to quietly fight his body's betrayal. His last film, Final Destination, Bloodlines, wrapped just months before his death. In it, there's a scene they didn't write, a monologue he improvised. He looked right into the camera and said, "Don't waste your breath hating life. That breath is all you have." No one cut it. No one dared. He died on November 6, 2024. He was 69. And when the news broke, fans didn't just post Candyman quotes. They shared the lesser-known lines, the Platoon moments, the theater roles, the wisdom buried in horror.